Earth had waited a long time to be seen. For more than 200 years, humans had watched the stars and listened to signals that were never meant for them. When the Galactic Assembly finally allowed Earth to send a delegation, people across the planet celebrated. Children painted stars on their faces. Old scientists cried on live broadcasts. Leaders spoke of peace, learning, and shared futures. But the galaxy did not celebrate with them. The grand hall of the assembly was larger than any human city. It floated in space like a carved moon, its walls alive with shifting light. Hundreds of species filled the chamber. Some had wings, some had shells, some had bodies made of energy. Humans looked small there, fragile, soft. Commander Elias Rowan stood among the human delegation. He wore a simple uniform, no weapons, no armor. His hands were steady, but his heart beat fast. He had trained for war, for survival, for loss, but not for this kind of judgment. Laughter echoed through the hall. It was not loud at first. It came in waves, like ripples across water. Then it grew, pointing fingers, clicking sounds, sharp alien tones that translators softened but could not fully hide. "Their bones are hollow," one voice said. "They age too fast," said another. "They fight each other even without enemies." The laughter grew louder when the 5 royal seats lit up. The daughters of King Valtharion had arrived. They were known across the galaxy as the Crowned 5. Each princess ruled a sector. Each was feared, admired, or worshipped. They were tall, elegant, and powerful, their forms shaped by generations of controlled evolution. Princess Kalira smiled coldly as she looked at the humans. Her eyes shimmered like liquid metal. Princess Threxia leaned forward, amusement clear in her posture. "Is this the species that thinks it belongs among us?" Princess Orin tilted her head. "They break so easily." Princess Valus laughed openly. "Father, is this a joke?" Princess Saineth said nothing. She only watched, her expression unreadable. King Valtharion rose from his throne. The hall fell silent at once. He was ancient, vast, his presence heavy, like gravity. His voice carried without effort. "Earth," he said. "You have been observed, studied, measured."
Elias felt every word like weight on his chest.
"You are weak in body," the king continued. "Short in life, divided in spirit." The human ambassador opened his mouth to speak, but Valtharion raised a hand. "Yet," the king said, "you are here." The princesses exchanged looks. Valtharion turned to them. "My daughters, you know the law of our bloodline." The hall stirred. The law was old, older than many stars. The royal line required heirs capable of stabilizing the genetic chaos that came with their power. For generations, no union with other species had succeeded. Many children were stillborn. Others grew unstable, dangerous. The galaxy feared what would happen if the line ended. "You will produce heirs," Valtharion said calmly. "Not for love, not for pride, for survival." Princess Threxia frowned. "We have tried every superior race, and failed," the king replied. He turned back to the assembly. "Therefore, I invoke the will." Gasps rippled through the chamber. "The king's will," someone whispered. Valtharion's gaze returned to the humans. "As insult and as test," he said, "Earth will be included." Laughter exploded again, louder, sharper than before. The princesses laughed too. "With them?" Kalira said. "Father, they cannot even survive our atmosphere without machines. They are beneath us. Valus added. Elias clenched his fists. Daltherion did not smile.
You mistake strength, he said. The will is not about dominance.
It is about balance. The laughter faded into confusion. The trial will proceed, Valtherion declared. One human representative will be selected voluntarily. The human delegation froze. The ambassador turned pale. Your Majesty. We do not. Earth may refuse, Daltherion said, and return to silence. The meaning was clear. Earth would vanish from galactic notice forever. Elias felt something settle inside him, a quiet decision. He stepped forward. I volunteer, he said. The hall went silent again. Hundreds of eyes turned to him. The ambassador whispered urgently, Commander, this is not... Elias did not look back. I represent Earth! Princess Velis laughed again. This one? He looks like he would break in half. Princess Threxia circled him slowly, her presence overwhelming. Do you even understand what you offer, human? Elias met her gaze. His voice was calm. Responsibility. That word caused a flicker of interest from the king. Baltharion studied him closely.
You are not afraid.
I am, Elias said honestly. But fear does not decide everything.
The king nodded once. Then the trial begins. The humans were escorted away, their cheers replaced by stunned silence across the planet when the news reached Earth. Some called Elias a hero. Others called him a sacrifice. Many called him doomed. The princesses, meanwhile, treated the coming process as entertainment. They mocked human biology in private chambers. They joked about how quickly the experiment would fail. They made wagers on how long before Earth was shamed. Only Soneth remained quiet. She watched Elias during preparations, how he listened, how he asked questions not about power, but about safety, about consequences. You do not hate us, she said once. Elias looked at her. No. Even after the laughter, he paused. I have seen worse. Something shifted in her eyes. As the trial neared, scientists across the galaxy watched closely, expecting confirmation of human weakness. None of them expected what would come next. And far away on Earth, people looked up at the night sky, unaware that the fate of their species now rested not on weapons or technology, but on the quiet strength of one human who refused to be small. The trial did not begin with ceremony. There were no cheers, no proud speeches, no music. Instead, Elias Rowan was taken deep beneath the grand hall, into a place where the walls were alive with light and the air smelled of metal and cold stone. This was the Royal Genetic Sanctum, a facility older than many civilizations. Here, entire species had been tested and quietly erased from history when they failed. Elias felt small walking through its corridors, but he did not slow his steps. Alien scientists watched him closely, some with curiosity, many with disbelief, a few with open disgust. He will not survive the first phase, one muttered. Human cells degrade too quickly, another replied. Their words were translated clearly in Elias's ear, but he did not respond. He had learned long ago that arguing with those who had already decided your fate was pointless. The Crowned Five observed from above, seated behind a transparent barrier. Princess Velis leaned back lazily. How long do you think before this ends, sisters? Minutes, Threxia said with a smirk. Generous, Kaelira replied. I give him seconds. Only Soneth remained silent, her eyes following Elias as he stepped onto the central platform. The king watched as well. His expression revealed nothing. The first phase was observation. Elias was scanned by hundreds of instruments. Light passed through his skin. Fields tested his neural patterns, his heart rate, breath, stress responses, all recorded and analyzed. The scientists expected chaos. Instead, they saw balance. His autonomic responses are stable, one said slowly.
That is not possible under this pressure,
Another argued. Elias stood still, breathing evenly. He remembered training in extreme environments. Cold nights, long marches, loss of comrades. This place was frightening, but it was not worse than war. Princess Threxia narrowed her eyes.
Why is he not breaking? Kylira waved a hand. Observation means nothing. The real failure comes later. The second phase began.
A controlled genetic interface was activated. It did not force change. It tested compatibility, how a species responded when exposed to royal genetic energy. The last alien tested had screamed before collapsing. Elias felt heat spread through his body, sharp at first, then deep, like pressure against his bones. His vision blurred. Pain rose fast.
He clenched his jaw. Do not fight it blindly, he told himself.
Adapt. Instead of resisting, Elias focused on steady breathing, letting his body adjust naturally. His muscles tightened, then relaxed. His heartbeat slowed again. Data streams spiked across the screens. Impossible, a scientist whispered. His cells are adjusting.
They are not rejecting the energy, another said. They are
harmonizing. Princess Valus sat up.
That is a malfunction. It is not, replied a senior researcher, voice tense. We are seeing adaptive resonance.
The king leaned forward slightly. The interface shut down. Elias staggered, but remained standing. The room was silent. He endured, Threxia said slowly.
But endurance is not success.
No, the king agreed. It is only proof of potential.
The third phase was the most sensitive.
It involved emotional and psychological alignment. Royal offspring required not just biological stability, but emotional grounding. Many advanced species failed here, their minds fractured under the weight of royal instinct and power. Elias was placed into a neural chamber. Images flooded his mind. Alien worlds burning, starships breaking apart, children of different species crying, power without control, authority without compassion. The chamber measured his reactions. Anger was expected. Fear was expected. Submission was expected. Instead, Elias felt sorrow. He did not see weakness. He saw responsibility. His thoughts slowed. He focused on one idea. If you are given strength, you are accountable for how you use it. The sensors trembled. His empathy levels are off the scale, a scientist said quietly. That trait is inefficient, another replied. It is stabilizing, the senior researcher corrected. Above them, Princess Saneth's breath caught slightly. When Elias emerged, pale but conscious, the room was filled with whispered arguments.
This should not be happening. Humans are primitive. Our models did not include emotional adaptability. Princess Valus stood abruptly. End this farce. The king raised a hand. No, she froze. The trial continues, Valtherian said.
As the will demands. Days passed. Elias was kept within the sanctum, under constant watch. He was given food, rest, and medical care. No chains.
No threats. That unsettled many observers more than cruelty would have.
The princesses visited individually. Kylira came first. She circled him slowly, studying his posture. You do not look victorious.
I am not here to win, Elias replied.
Then why endure this? Because my people deserve to be judged fairly. She laughed softly. Fairness is a myth of the weak.
Bah! Perhaps that is why the strong keep failing, Elias said calmly.
Her smile faded.
Threxia arrived next. She questioned him sharply about human conflict, ambition, and violence. Yes, Elias admitted. We are flawed. Then why should your species matter? Because we learn, he said, sometimes slowly, sometimes painfully. But we change. She left without responding. Velis was last, and the cruelest. She mocked Earth openly. Its wars, its pollution, its divisions. Elias listened without interruption. When she finished, he said, Everything you said is true. She blinked, thrown off balance. But we still protect our children, he continued. We still hope. We still choose to stand when it would be easier to kneel. For the first time, Velis had no sharp reply. Saneth did not come to challenge him. She came to speak. You are afraid of what comes next, she said quietly. Yes, Elias replied, yet you do not regret volunteering. No, even knowing the cost. He met her eyes. Some things are worth carrying. She studied him for a long moment.
That night the results were released to the king alone. He read them in silence.
Compatibility levels far beyond predicted limits. Emotional stabilization markers stronger than any tested species. Biological adaptability that defied existing theory. Humanity, it seemed, was not weak. It was unfinished. The next phase would involve direct involvement of the royal bloodline. The princesses were informed. Shock rippled through the palace.
This is impossible, Kyalira said. We will not participate, Velis snapped.
Baltherian's voice was calm but absolute. You will. And if we refuse, then the line ends with you. Silence fell. For the first time in their lives, the Crowned Five felt fear, not of failure, but of responsibility. And far below, Elias Rowan looked up at the alien sky beyond the sanctum walls, unaware that the galaxy had already begun to shift around him. Because the trial had proven one thing beyond doubt. Humanity did not break, and the galaxy did not know what to do with that. The next phase changed everything. Until now, the trial had been watched as science data, probability, failure, or success, measured in numbers. But when the royal bloodline became directly involved, the galaxy stopped laughing. Elias Rowan was moved from the sanctum to a private wing of the royal complex. The space was quiet, guarded, and sealed from public view. Not because he was a prisoner, but because the king understood what came next would make enemies. Across the galaxy, whispers spread. A human had passed the royal trials. That sentence alone shook long-held beliefs. In the high councils of rival empires, alarms were raised. Human adaptability had been underestimated before, but never like this. If humanity could stabilize the royal line, then power across the galaxy would shift in ways no one could control. Some demanded the trial be stopped, others demanded the human be removed. A few spoke the word no. One wanted to say out loud, eliminate him. King Valtherian felt the pressure, but he did not bend. The will stands, he said to the assembly. Interference will be treated as an act of war. That silenced most voices. Inside the palace, the Crowned Five were anything but silent. This is madness, Princess Vela said, pacing. We are being forced into something unprecedented. We were forced the moment we were born, Kyalira replied coldly. Threxia crossed her arms. The problem is not the trial. It is that the humans succeeded. None of them looked at Saneth. She sat apart, thoughtful. Perhaps the problem, she said slowly, is that we were wrong. Vela stopped.
Do not say that. Why?
Saneth asked calmly. Because it frightens you? Silence followed. Elias was informed of the next steps by a senior royal mediator. The explanation was careful, precise, and stripped of emotion. "There will be no coercion," the mediator said. "Consent, safety, and stability are required. The process is guided by law and monitored fully." Elias listened closely. "And the princesses? They have agreed," the mediator said. Elias did not believe that word meant the same thing for them as it did for him. When he was left alone, he sat on the edge of the room's sleeping platform and stared at his hands. He thought of Earth, of people who would never know his name, only the result of his choice. He felt fear, not of pain, but of failing them. He was not a conqueror. He was not a hero. He was just human. The first meeting was with Kaelira. She entered the chamber with controlled grace, her posture perfect. But Elias noticed the tension in her shoulders. "You do not look at me as others do," she said. "How do they look at you?" Elias asked. "As power, as certainty. And how do I look at you?" She considered. "As a person. That is all I know how to do," he said. She studied him in silence. "If this fails, the blame will fall on us?" "And if it succeeds?" he asked. Her voice softened. "Then nothing will ever be the same." Threxia came next. She was direct, sharp, and clearly struggling with her own thoughts. "My entire life," she said, "I was told humans were weak." "And now?" Elias asked. "Now my science tells me you are—" "Compatible," she said, as if the word tasted strange. "I do not know what to feel about that." Do not have to know yet," Elias said. "Uncertainty is allowed." She gave a short, humorless laugh. "In my world, it never was." Velis resisted the longest. When she finally entered, her confidence was brittle. "I still do not respect your species," she said. Elias nodded. "You are allowed that." She frowned. "You do not argue. Respect cannot be forced," he replied. "Only earned. Over time." She searched his face, looking for deception, pride, hunger. Anything she had been taught to expect, she found none. The process began under constant observation. Not described as intimacy, not described as ritual, but as duty, carefully regulated, monitored, safe. What followed was not dramatic at first. Days passed. Then weeks. The galaxy waited. Scientists watched data streams with growing confusion. Royal genetic markers stabilized instead of destabilizing. Hormonal patterns aligned cleanly. No rejection, no collapse. Then came the moment that changed everything. The first confirmation. A senior researcher stood before King Baltherion, hands trembling. "There is successful conception," she said. The king closed his eyes briefly. "Which daughter?" he asked. "All of them," the researcher said. Silence filled the chamber. Even Baltherion was unprepared for that. Across the palace, reactions exploded. Kaelira stared at the medical display, unreadable. Threxia sat down slowly, as if the floor had shifted beneath her. Velis laughed once, sharply, then covered her mouth as reality set in. Sonoth simply closed her eyes, exhaling. The news did not stay contained. It never does. Within hours, the galaxy knew. Panic followed. 5 heirs. Human-linked. Royal blood stabilized. The balance of power tilted violently. Demands flooded the assembly. This was an abomination. This was a threat. This was a reason for war.
On Earth, the announcement arrived like a storm.
Shock, pride, fear. Some celebrated Elias as the greatest human representative in history. Others called it reckless. But one truth spread everywhere. Humanity mattered now. Elias learned the news alone. He sat quietly as the mediator told him. "You have done what no species has done," she said. He did not smile.
Are they safe? He asked.
Yes, that is what matters, he said. Security was increased immediately. Threats were intercepted. Sabotage attempts uncovered. Assassins stopped before they reached the palace. The princesses were moved to protected chambers. For the first time, they were not symbols of untouchable power, but targets. And for the first time, they were afraid. Elias stood between them and the storm, not with weapons, but with presence, with calm, with refusal to abandon responsibility. One night, Soneth came to him. "You never planned this," she said. "No," Elias replied, "but I will not run from it." She nodded slowly. Then, perhaps the prophecy was never about strength. Then what was it about? He asked. She placed a hand over her chest. Endurance, care, the will to carry what others fear. Outside the palace, fleets gathered. Inside, new life grew. And across the galaxy, an old truth began to crack. Humans had been laughed at. But now, no one was laughing anymore, because the impossible had already happened. And it was only the beginning. The galaxy did not accept the news quietly. Within days of the confirmation, fleets began to move. Not openly at first. Patrol routes changed. Military drills increased. Ancient alliances were suddenly reviewed. Every major power understood the same thing. If the royal bloodline was stabilized through a human, then the center of gravity of the galaxy had shifted. And many were afraid of where it might land. King Valtherion watched the reports arrive, one after another. His advisors argued constantly now, some urging strength, others urging secrecy. None of them denied the truth. The heirs growing within his daughters were real. They were stable, and they carried human influence. "The rival coalition will demand intervention," one advisor said. "They will claim this violates galactic balance." Valtherion's voice was calm. The balance was already broken. This merely reveals it. In the protected chambers, the crowned five were no longer treated as untouchable royalty. Guards stood outside every door. Medical teams monitored them constantly. The palace, once a symbol of absolute control, now felt like a fortress under siege. Princess Calera adjusted slowly to the change. She had always believed control meant distance, authority, and silence. Now she felt something new growing alongside the life within her, a sharp awareness of vulnerability. Threxia struggled more openly. She snapped at attendants, argued with doctors, and paced endlessly. The loss of certainty gnawed at her. Velis was quieter than anyone expected. The one who had mocked the loudest now stared out at the stars for long periods, her confidence replaced by restless thought. Saneth remained steady. She spoke little, but when she did, others listened. And Elias Rowan stayed. He was offered safety on Earth. The human government sent urgent messages demanding his return. They feared assassination, political leverage, and retaliation. Elias refused. "If I leave now," he said calmly, "everything I did becomes a weapon instead of a responsibility." So he stayed in the palace, moving freely between guarded halls, unarmed, watched by soldiers who did not know whether to fear or respect him. Some resented him. Others studied him. A few quietly trusted him. When the first direct threat came, it did not arrive as an attack. It arrived as an offer. An envoy from a powerful rival empire requested a private meeting. The message was polite, reasonable. Dangerous. King Valtherion allowed it, but watched closely. The envoy spoke smoothly. "This situation is unstable," she said. "5 heirs with human influence will cause unrest for generations." Elias listened without interruption. "We propose a solution," the envoy continued. "Relocation, quiet separation. The human returns to Earth. The heirs are managed." Elias's jaw tightened slightly. "Managed how?" The envoy smiled thinly, in a way that preserves peace. That is not peace, Elias replied. That is control through erasure. You are in no position to negotiate, she said. Elias looked directly at her. Then you misunderstand why this worked at all. The meeting ended without agreement. 2 days later, the first attack came, not on the palace, on a supply convoy. No casualties, but the message was clear. Fear spread. The assembly demanded emergency sessions. Some species openly called for the heir's termination. Others threatened secession if the king did not act. The princesses heard everything. I knew this would happen, Threxia said bitterly. We are becoming targets because of this. Because of change, Soneth corrected. Targets appear when power moves. Velis looked at Elias. Do you regret this now? He answered honestly. I regret that fear rules so many decisions, but not this. Security tightened further. The palace became a locked world. Outside, fleets gathered closer. Inside, the princesses changed in quieter ways. Kaelra began asking questions, not about politics, but about Earth. About families. About how humans prepared for uncertainty. When humans face extinction, she asked one evening, what do? Elias thought. Some fight, some flee, some freeze. But many hold on to each other. That sounds inefficient, she said. It is, he replied, but it works. Threxia watched him differently now, less as a variable, more as a constant. Velis struggled the most. Pride was hard to shed. But fear cracked it open. One night, alarms rang through the palace. An infiltration attempt. Elite attackers breached the outer defenses. Not soldiers, but specialists trained to disrupt genetics labs and medical centers. Their target was clear. The heirs. The palace guards fought fiercely, but the attackers were skilled and desperate. Elias was with Soneth when the alarms began. She stiffened.
They are coming for us, he nodded. Stay behind me.
She hesitated. You are unarmed. I know. They moved through smoke-filled corridors as security teams clashed nearby. Energy blasts scorched walls. Alarms screamed. An attacker rounded a corner suddenly. Elias stepped forward without thinking. He did not fight with strength. He fought with intent. He blocked, distracted, took the hit meant for Saneth. Pain exploded across his side as he hit the ground. Guards arrived seconds later. The attacker was neutralized. Saneth knelt beside Elias, her hands shaking. You are injured? She said. I'm still here, he replied through clenched teeth. Medical teams rushed in. News spread fast. A human had shielded a royal heir with his own body. Across the palace, something shifted. This was not strategy, not politics, not obligation. This was choice. The attack failed, but its impact echoed across the galaxy. The narrative began to change. Humans were no longer discussed only as an anomaly. They were discussed as protectors, as stabilizers, as a species willing to stand between power and destruction. King Valtherion addressed the assembly soon after. You fear change, he said. So do I. But fear does not justify annihilation. He paused. The human did not seek power. He accepted responsibility. That is why this succeeded. Some listened, some did not. The fleets did not withdraw. Instead, they waited, preparing for escalation. Inside the palace, the princesses gathered together for the first time without rivalry. We cannot go back, Velis said quietly. No, Kaelira agreed. And we should not. Threxia exhaled slowly. Then we must stand. Saneth looked at Elias. Will you stand with us? He met their eyes one by one. I already am. Outside, the galaxy edged closer to open conflict. Inside, something stronger than fear took root. Not domination, not conquest, but unity forged under pressure. The next choice would decide everything. And humanity, once mocked and dismissed, now stood at the center of a storm that would reshape the stars. Because the galaxy had tried to erase what it did not understand, the days that followed were tense beyond measure. The palace, once a symbol of absolute authority, had transformed into a bastion of protection. Every hallway, every chamber, every window overlooking the endless stars was under constant watch. Yet, within these walls, life continued. The 5 princesses moved with caution, their pride tempered by the reality of the heirs growing within them. Elias Rowan, the human who had once been laughed at across the galaxy, moved among them freely, unarmed, unbowed, but no less vigilant. Outside, fleets from multiple empires remained at the edges of sensor range, waiting. Any misstep could trigger a war that might engulf the sector. But inside the palace, something quietly, steadily shifted. Respect, not forced, not demanded, but earned. The first confirmation of life had come weeks before, but now the heirs were thriving, healthy, and stable. The scientists monitoring them could no longer claim coincidence or fluke. Their readings were consistent. Human adaptability had combined with royal genetics in a way no one had thought possible. Each princess now carried a child that represented not just her line, but humanity itself. The crowned 5 gathered in the largest private chamber. The tension between them was palpable, but it was not only fear or pride. It was the realization that their lives, their duties, and their very power had changed irrevocably. Kaelira spoke first, her voice tight.
We have underestimated them.
Every calculation, every theory, wrong. Every expectation, shattered.
Threxia shook her head. It is not just biology.
It is choice. Humanity does not act out of pride or fear alone. They act because they care. Velis was silent for a long moment, staring out the window at the star-strewn void. I mocked them, she admitted finally.
I laughed at them. And now?
I see that the truth is far greater than any joke. Sanath turned toward Elias, who had quietly remained on the periphery of the group. And yet, she said softly, they trust you. They follow your lead, even when they do not fully understand it. Elias did not flinch.
I have no desire for power, he said, but I cannot ignore responsibility.
That is why I stand. That is why I stay. The princesses regarded him differently now. Not as a subject, not as a variable, not even as a curiosity, but as a constant. A human who had endured every trial, who had chosen to face fear instead of running, who had protected the future of their line with his very body. The political situation outside the palace escalated. Rival empires had begun to realize that the heirs could not be ignored, contained, or erased. Fleet formations adjusted. Diplomatic messages arrived simultaneously. Threats, demands, and offers of alliance. All of them were cautious, for none had faced a species that could stabilize the royal bloodline. King Valtherion convened the assembly once more. His presence alone silenced arguments and speculation, but even he spoke differently this time. The galaxy has witnessed what you thought impossible, he said. Humans have proven that strength is not only measured in power or longevity, it is measured in responsibility, endurance, and choice. These traits are what will preserve the royal line and the galaxy itself.
Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Some delegates accepted the truth reluctantly.
Others bristled at it. But for the first time, humans were treated as equals. Not in theory, not on paper, but in reality. Back in the palace, the princesses and Elias worked quietly to prepare for the future. They trained together,
learned from one another, and began to understand that the greatest threat was not from outside, but from the fear of change itself. When the first fleet from a rival empire approached the outer perimeter, it did so with caution, scanning for weaknesses, testing defenses, and observing the human and his princess wards. But no attack came. The rival commanders reported to their home worlds. The human had become more than a participant in the trial. He had become a protector, a symbol. And symbols, they realized, could not be destroyed without consequence. Inside the palace, life continued. The princesses, once proud and untouchable, grew more introspective. Kyalira asked questions about Earth, about its people, its customs, its endurance. Threxia began to speak less sharply, listening instead of ordering. Velis, once the most mocking, now silently observed and reflected on her own past arrogance. And Soneth, ever calm, watched both humans and aliens, with a quiet understanding that bridged the gap between worlds. Elias remained steady, never seeking praise or recognition. He moved from room to room, offering guidance, comfort, and quiet strength. He taught the princesses that fear could be endured, that responsibility could be embraced, and that unity could be found even among the most unlikely allies. Months passed, and the heirs continued to grow. Their presence became a source of wonder and unease throughout the galaxy. Every report confirmed stability. Every observation reinforced the impossible truth. Humans had succeeded where all others had failed. The Crowned Five began to see their own potential differently. They were no longer simply heirs of power. They were guardians of a future that combined the best of two species. And Elias, a human who had entered the trial with nothing but courage, had become the linchpin that held it all together. At the height of tension, King Valtharion summoned a private audience. Elias and the princesses were present, standing together for the first time as a unit rather than as observer and subject.
"The galaxy has tested humanity," the king said. "And they have passed."
Not with weapons, not with conquest, but with choice, with endurance, with care.
He paused, looking at each princess.
You have all learned something as well. Your arrogance blinded you. Your pride restrained you. And yet you have been taught humility. You have been reminded that power without responsibility is hollow. Soneth nodded slightly, a faint smile touching her lips. We have learned well, she said. Kalira, Threxia, and Velis echoed her silently in their own ways, acknowledging the shift within themselves. Valtharion turned toward Elias. You, human, have changed the course of this dynasty. You have proven that the strength of a species is not measured by fear or cruelty, but by endurance and choice. The galaxy will not forget this. Elias bowed slightly. I only did what any responsible human would do, he said. The king's eyes softened, a rare expression in one so ancient. Few would have the courage. Fewer still the wisdom.
And then something remarkable happened.
For the first time in recorded history, the Crowned Five spoke in unison, not as princesses, not as rivals, but as allies. We will protect what we carry, they said, and Elias, standing beside them, knew that humanity had finally earned a place in the stars, not through fear, conquest, or dominance, but through the quiet, unyielding courage that had always defined them. Outside the palace, fleets withdrew cautiously. The galaxy had learned a lesson it would not forget. Underestimating humans was no longer an option. Inside, the palace was quiet. The princesses rested, knowing that the future was safe for now. Elias sat with them, observing the calm, and thought of Earth, of all the people who would never know the role he had played, yet would inherit the legacy. The heirs grew healthy and strong, symbols of unity between worlds. The princesses no longer laughed at humanity. They respected it, feared it in some ways, and finally understood it. And as the stars stretched endlessly beyond the palace walls, Elias Rowan realized that what had begun as a trial had become a testament. Humans were small, fragile, and often underestimated. Yet, when it mattered most, they could endure, adapt, and rise to meet impossible challenges. The galaxy had laughed at Earth, but humanity had answered, and the galaxy would never again underestimate them. The Crowned Five smiled faintly at the human who had stood beside them, protecting the future without hesitation, without fear, without expectation of reward. He had become more than a human in their eyes. He had become the standard of courage. And in that quiet, unassuming victory, the galaxy learned a simple truth. Sometimes, strength is not in what you take, but in what you carry. And humanity had carried the future of the stars.